Our next witness is to be known as Mrs. C. I make an individual restriction order in the same terms as I've made earlier. Let me just set them out. It is ordered that the name and address of witness W2687, we shall know her as Mrs. C, the name of her son who died, the name of any other member of her family, and any other identifying information, such as the witness's image or a description of her appearance, cannot be disclosed or published in any form unless express permission is given by me or by the solicitor to the inquiry acting on my behalf. Witness W2687 must be referred to only as Mrs. C. The order remains in force for the duration of the inquiry and at all times thereafter, unless otherwise ordered. I may vary or revoke the order by making a further order during the course of the inquiry. Mrs. C.
Mrs. C, your name is known to the inquiry. Could you please now repeat after me? I do solemnly, sincerely,
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
You're here to give evidence with the support of your husband about your son,
Yeah,
and you're going to use his name in your evidence because it would be very hard for you to talk about him without naming him. But the effect of the restriction order is that nobody can publish or disclose or pass on or report that name.
yes,
And this, I know, is the first time you've spoken outside of your immediate family about what's happened.
yes,
If you need a break at any time, please don't hesitate to tell us.
thank you.
So he was born in 1978,
Yes,
and he was diagnosed almost immediately, I understand, with Hemophilia A,
he was, yes,
and his haemophilia was classed as severe.
it was, yes,
And one of your older children
yes,
had also very recently at that point been diagnosed with haemophilia whilst you were pregnant with.
yes. We found out when I was 6 months pregnant.
But that was only after a prolonged period of time, a distressing period of time,
Yes,
in which your other son had bruising and swelling, and you were being accused or suspected of having injured him.
I was, yes,
But after some 11 months or so, your elder son was diagnosed with severe haemophilia,
yes,
and so the diagnosis was picked up at birth.
straight away, yeah,
Now, I think when he was little, you were very conscious of his condition,
yes.
and you used to wrap him in cotton wool.
I was frightened for anything to happen because of my other son. I'd seen what had happened. So he didn't learn to walk till he was 2. And that was when he was in the hospital having treatment, and the physiotherapist got him walking. But that was purely because I didn't really let him go about very much because I was frightened. In them days, they used to say they padded a playpen for him and my other son, and that's like all cotton wool, so they couldn't get hurt. So I think I restricted him from walking, actually.
But he did learn to walk.
He did.
And you've described him as a very easy child, a lovely chubby boy.
He was, yeah.
Did he, as a baby, need any treatment for his haemophilia?
Not for the first, I'd say he had his first treatment when he was about 18 months.
And that was when you were on a trip somewhere to
was on
visit a relative?
Yeah, we was on a trip to go and see my sister, and he was sitting on my knee, and it was an all-night coach journey. But by the time we got off the coach, he didn't want to move his arm, It wasn't swollen or anything, but you could see he just didn't want you to touch it or anything. So we had to I took him to the hospital in Burnley. They then, I don't think they knew much about haemophilia, but they contacted the hospital in Charing Cross where we used to attend, and they told them what to do and to give him his factor VIII.
Was it cryoprecipitate he was given at that stage?
At that stage, yes, it was.
And after that, he ended up having to go to the hospital fairly regularly to receive, at that stage, cryoprecipitate.
That's right, yes.
And he didn't like it, did he?
No, he didn't.
You'd have to wrap him up and hold him down.
Yeah, and it used to
family.
take quite a long while for it to go in as well. So it was quite difficult with him.
So the point in time came, I think you recalled in your statement, around 1983, when his treatment changed from cryoprecipitate to what you were told were factor VIII
Factor
products.
VIII, yeah.
And who would administer the factor VIII to him?
At first, before I learnt how to do it, we used to go to the hospital and they would do it. But then I practised with one of the doctors, used to let me practice on him. First it was with an orange and then it was him until I learnt. And we were told it was a brilliant thing because we could take the treatment home and keep it in a fridge. So because the boys used to have quite a lot of bleeds, they used to say that we could give them the factor VIII immediately so it didn't get as bad. So that's what we did.
So you welcomed it as something that would make life easier in terms of your ability to treat your boys.
Exactly.
Were you given any warnings about the factor VIII products?
No, I was just told it was an amazing thing. And in my head it did seem that way because when we used to go to the hospital and it was cryo, you'd go and you'd wait to see the doctor, then the doctor would bring the stuff down, then you had to wait again. And the cryo used to take quite a long time to go in as well. So this was a lot better.
And was there ever any discussion with you about the particular factor VIII products that were being used or any differences between different kinds of factor VIII products?
No.
Now, a year or two, I think, after he'd started on the factor VIII, he developed a problem with a milk tooth. Can you recall what happened?
It got very wobbly and it was bleeding, but his gums swelled round it so it wouldn't fall out. So I phoned up the hospital. We used to have to go to the haematology unit because they never had a haemophilia clinic there. And she told me to come up and what she would do is see if the dentist could take it out. We got to the hospital and they called the dentist down. When she did come down, she come in a space to Sue. And she's like she didn't want to touch the phone. She said that it would fall out eventually. So I said to her it wouldn't because this has been going on for a couple of weeks. I said his gums is too swollen. And I was trying to show it to her, but she didn't want to come close and she certainly didn't want to put her hands by his mouth. So then the doctor said to her that they needed to take it out. It wouldn't take, because it was so loose. So that she took him away and I said to the doctor, what is going on? Because I didn't understand. And she took me in a room. That is when she gave me a blue plastic bottle and a box of gloves. And she told me that the boys had been tested for HIV. I didn't know what she was talking about. And she said that they'd tested positive. And in future, when I give them their factor VIII, I had to wear gloves and use the blue plastic bottle to put them in. I said to her, because I'd seen how the dentist was reacting, but what about my other children? And she just said to me she didn't know, and then sent me home, and that's how it was.
So you'd gone for what you thought was routine dental treatment, essentially, to deal with the swelling that had arisen around his tooth. The dentist had come and you understood that there was something strange, something odd going on because of the way the dentist was clothed. You described it as a spacesuit. The dentist had a mask on and the dentist was, you thought, very obviously reluctant even to touch. And that's how you were told by the doctor who was there that your two boys, including, were HIV positive.
Yes.
And you've described being given the blue plastic bottle and plastic gloves.
Yeah.
You were told that that was how you should administer factor VIII in future to the boys.
Yes.
Did the doctor tell you what HIV was?
No.
Did the doctor tell you anything about the connection between HIV and AIDS?
No, she didn't. But then later on, in them days, there was a lot coming on the news. But then they were saying it was drug takers, gay people that were getting it. And it was horrible, actually, at that time. It was really horrible. But to be honest, I don't know. I think I shut it out of my mind. I just didn't. These were two little boys. I just didn't accept what they were saying.
Was, at the time we're describing, 7 years old?
He was 6, going on 7.
And you weren't, I think, given any information about what the longer-term prognosis would be for either of them?
No.
And you were particularly concerned for a whole range of reasons, but you had a baby at home.
Yeah.
And you asked about the risks of infection and what you should do in relation to any of your other children, and the only answer you got was that
She didn't know.
Did you know that your boys were going to be tested for HIV?
No.
Did you ever receive anything in writing about the diagnosis of HIV from the hospital after that?
No.
So it was a bottle, gloves, and I don't know.
Yeah. And then later, I think about a week later, my GP turned up at my door. He had a lady with him. I think she must have been something to do with education, because it was about, they would come and they said to me that they had to go to the boys' school to let them know that they'd been tested HIV. And that was all I heard after that.
And you didn't understand why the school needed to be informed, but in fact the school treated the boys and you...
They didn't treat
okay.
us any different, no.
But I think your immediate reaction on being told the news at the hospital in the way you've described, you went to see your sister in a state of shock and you called
I
your
did, because I
husband.
didn't know what to do. So I ran to my sister, and she is the only one I actually told, to be honest. And then we phoned my husband, and he come home. My sister, she was shocked, but even she didn't actually know what this meant.
And what you've said in your statement at that point is you just didn't understand what was meant by the diagnosis that you've been given. You've described how you became aware from stuff that was on TV or in the newspapers about AIDS, but you didn't really associate that with what was happening to your children.
No, I didn't.
Your children were children with haemophilia who'd been treated by the National Health Service, and you couldn't make the correlation.
No.
But I think you were told by your sister or a friend about an article in the newspaper.
My sister phoned me up, and she said that her neighbour had bought a paper, the Daily Star, and that in it was saying that there was 3 boys, 2 brothers have got AIDS in the hospital that my children attend to. I knew that there was only 3 haemophiliacs in that hospital. It might seem silly, but it was true. There was only 3 boys there, my 2 and another little boy. So I knew they were talking about my sons. So I went to the hospital to ask them what was it about. And the doctor said to me that she wasn't sure who had leaked the news out, but they were trying to find out. But it wasn't AIDS, it was HIV that my sons had.
I'm going to ask to be put up on the screen in front of you a newspaper article from around that time, 2687006, please, Paul. And are you able to highlight the top left-hand article? Thank you. So this is from a newspaper, the Gazette. We've also got the Daily Star article that you referred to, but they say the same thing. If we just look at this briefly together, please, Mrs. C. So it talks about 3 boys with a deadly virus in hospital. It says the children do not necessarily have the killer disease AIDS, but experts say that about 1 in 10 people found with the virus later develop the disease, and that because of their low resistance to infections, haemophiliacs stand a higher than average chance of catching the disease. Had you been told any of that by the hospital?
No.
The higher chance of HIV turning to AIDS because of...
I've only just, when they sent me this paper, I think it was last week, I only saw it then, so I wasn't aware of it.
The hospital hadn't told you that?
No.
And then if we just read on down, it says, the parents of the children know of the risks to their children. Had the risks ever been explained to you?
No.
And then a spokesman for the North West Thames Regional Health Authority says they have been informed about the positive tests. They are being counselled by senior doctors and the 3 boys are being monitored very closely. Were you counselled by senior doctors?
No, I was not.
And do you recall whether the boys were being closely monitored at the hospital?
Well, we actually did go to the hospital a lot because we used to go and have their treatment done there. So we was at the hospital a lot, but I don't know if it was being monitored closely for this.
Now, you can take that down, Principal. In 1986, the boys' care was transferred to St Thomas's Hospital.
Yes.
And the haemophilia care was under the care of Dr Savage there.
Yes.
And then in terms of the HIV infection, under the care of Dr O'Doherty.
Yes.
And around this time, it was suggested to you by the hospital, I don't know if it was Charing Cross or St Thomas's Hospital, that you should tell the boys
Yes.
that they had HIV.
Yes, they were very keen for us to tell them, but my 2 children was only 7 and 8. I just didn't think that I could tell them that, so we didn't. We eventually told them when I think it was 12 or 13. Sorry.
That's all right. No.
You
can say his name.
My other son was 14.
Yeah.
And that's when we told them.
I think what you said in your statement is the hospital kept telling you from day one you should tell them, but you couldn't see, given their young age, why they should. And again, when they got to 11 or 12, the hospital was saying you should tell them, but again, you thought that was too young.
I did, yes.
And eventually, you told them, and focusing for present purposes, he was 13 or 14 years old.
He was about 13, and we told them both together, actually.
Okay. And what can you recall about that discussion?
We explained what was the matter with them. First of all, they just went very quiet. And then we explained that when they cut themselves, they had to be careful and to keep it covered. Maybe I didn't speak about it too much because, to be honest with you, it was bad enough me knowing without telling them. At that point, they seemed quite healthy. And maybe in my head I thought, this isn't really happening anyway. So we didn't go in any big detail about it. Later on, when I looked at Diaries, he does make a thing that he knew there was something because I used to treat them different. When they went out, I'd make sure they had scarves and stuff on, whereas with my other children, I didn't used to. So obviously they were all aware, but they never actually said anything about it.
You described in your statement how they were quiet on receiving the news, and
yes.
You weren't sure how much they understood.
No.
Were you ever given any help or support or advice about how to tell them or how to support them?
No.
When he was about 11 years old, he was prescribed at St Thomas's Hospital treatment in relation to the HIV,
Yes.
AZT.
Yes. Up until then, up until the day we went to the hospital, he was still fine. He was still quite chubby. He had energy. He used to play cricket. But we went up for one of our normal appointments. They took to do his bloods because each time we went up there, they had blood tests done. And the doctor took me to another room. And he said there was a problem with white T cell count. There was something wrong with it. So he was going to start him on something they called AZT to help it, which they did.
Just pausing there, Mrs. C. Were you told anything about any side effects or risks or disadvantages to the AZT
No,
treatment?
I was just told this will help his T cell count.
What actually did happen in terms of physical condition after that?
Not long after, I'd say about a month to 6 weeks, you noticed there was a difference. He seemed to stop growing. He lost a lot of weight. He got thrush. Then he started getting ulcers in his mouth. We used to go to the guys' hospital there, and the dentist there used to try and his gums used to bleed. He was like a different person, to be honest. The ulcers in his mouth got really bad, and eventually they went down to in his stomach and his bottom. In the end, they started giving him steroids. They said that would help the ulcers. So apparently had a TB, which we were told it wasn't the sort of TB we would get. It was a TB that people with HIV got. Everything actually that happened to him was always the same thing. It wasn't what we would get. It's what people with HIV got. But the ulcers were a big problem. They give him steroids. He then started that he couldn't eat. Eventually, somebody from Guy's said, just give him a bit. He was absolutely fantastic. He said he would find something to be able to put on his mouth so that he could eat. And he bought a thick paste that he could put on his mouth so he could manage to eat. By this time, he was getting quite paranoid. He used to love his food, and he was documenting everything down. When he could drink, he was so proud when he could drink or he could eat anything. If they took a part of his tongue away for a biopsy to find out why, but we didn't get any answers back for that one. I think at that point it got too late. And about 2 weeks before he died, he was watching something on the TV, and it was a lady, and her husband had been having AZT. And she said that before he started having the AZT, he'd been fine, but once he started having AZT, all these problems come. When I went up to the hospital, he gave me a letter, and he said to me, don't read it there, wait till I go home. So I went home and I read the letter, and he was terrified. He said he'd seen this on the news, and he knew that he was having AZT. So I went back to the hospital, and I asked to speak to the doctor. When he come, what he said was that in the beginning, when they gave him the AZT, it was working, but it wasn't working now. So they'd stop him taking it. I went along with it because, to be honest, it gave him a little bit of relief because he was so frightened. In my head, I didn't believe it because from when he started taking the AZT, that was when all his problems started. They stopped his AZT then, but that was just 2 weeks before he died.
And when you say you didn't believe it, you didn't believe that the AZT had been working and had now stopped. You didn't think it had ever been working.
I don't think it has been. I don't know. I think it just hurried. it along, because previous to that he had been fine.
And you've said in your statement that you feel that it was used as a guinea pig by the hospital for AZT. Why is that?
I think it was because it happened in early days. I don't think actually they knew. Don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming the doctor at all for that. Dr. O'Doherty was brilliant. I don't think actually at that point they knew what to do, so I think that was just given to. I later found out that AZT actually isn't very good on its own. It needs to go with a combination of things. And wasn't given that. He was just given AZT.
And your other son wasn't given AZT at all and
No.
didn't develop any of these problems?
No.
So in January of 1994, his condition worsened.
It did.
He became very ill indeed. You described his paranoia. His weight went down to about 5 stone.
It was, yes.
And as well as the ulcers, he started getting bad chest, coughing, and stomach pains.
He was in a lot of pain. He was having a lot of morphine. At one point, because the morphine used to make him sleep, they tried to bring it down a bit. He was so frightened of that because he used to argue with them because I think the pain was too much. It was awful, but he was just, I don't know, the days when he could even just eat one thing made him so happy, and that's all he used to wish for, that when he used to love, actually, Kentucky chicken and chips, and he used to say that when he's better, he will go and that's the first thing he's going to have. He used to like cappuccinos. We used to take him down to the canteen, but he couldn't ever drink them. They used to give him, in the end, I think it was called Ensure. They used to freeze it for him because then he could just hold it in his mouth a bit because his mouth was so sore. Even to the extent of he couldn't go to the toilet a lot. And they'd give him an enema. My poor boy used to like having that done because it gave him some relief.
You found, we'll talk about his diaries in a little while, but one of the things he recorded in his diaries was that he'd be happy on the days he could go to the toilet because it would stop the pain and discomfort.
Yeah. He used to feel so bunged up. That's what his words that he used to use.
Even once the AZT was stopped a few weeks before he died, he was still being prescribed the steroids.
Yes.
He had to take iron tablets because of his anemia.
Yeah.
And morphine for the pain, and you described how he was frightened of that being reduced because he didn't want the pain.
No.
So he was taking, even without the AZT, 12 to 13 tablets daily at that point.
Yeah.
The ulcers had spread down from the mouth to his stomach, you were told, and the doctors wanted to start radiation therapy on the ulcers. Came home from the hospital for a weekend on the 16th of February.
That's right, yeah. And he had to go back on the 17th.
And I think he was quite chatty.
He was.
That visit home.
That visit home, he was very chatty. I've never heard him chat so much.
And he was talking about the new baby.
Yes, and that when the baby got bigger and he's got his job, he was going to get everything for him.
And then you took him back to hospital on the 17th of February for the radiation to begin.
Yeah, we left him in the evening time. He was fine. And my baby was 3 weeks old at the time. And we'd gone up to bed. And then in the early hours of the morning, we got a phone call. And my husband answered it. And the nurse said that wanted us to go up there. So he just said to him, we'll be there at 9 o'clock in the morning. And she said, oh, okay. And he put the phone down. Half an hour later, the phone rang again. When my husband answered it, she said, I think you better come up now. So he went up the hospital. Then I got a phone call. It was my husband. when he got there, he just died. So I had to wake one of my elder sons up to look after the children, and I got a minicab up to the hospital. When I got there, as I said, it just looked like he was sleeping with a sheet over him. I didn't know what my husband saw at that time. And even then, it's stupid. I thought it was a mistake. And I sat there with him, and I was holding his hand, and I thought in a minute he'll wake up. And that's how he was, but then I felt that the nurse kept coming in, and then she said that she had to do the room ready for the day staff to start. But even in my head, I'm thinking, why is she saying that for? I didn't want to go, but then my husband said to me, we better go because it won't. And when I come out, I saw Chris. She was one of the ladies that was with Dr. O'Doherty. And all I could say to her was, why? And she just said to me she didn't know. And we went home. We were told that we could go to the Hemophilia Centre on the Monday, and then I could go and see in the chapel of rest. So we got up and we went there in the morning. But when we went in the door, Dr. Savage met us, and his words to us was, we didn't really need to keep coming up the hospital now. To me, that was telling me it had gone. They didn't have to worry anymore. So I said that we could go and see, but we needed somebody to take us down to the chapel of rest because you can't just go down there yourself. So somebody took us down there, and we went and saw down there. They did say to me about the funeral parlour to go to, because they said there'd been a few families that some funeral parlours won't let you view them. So they sent me to somewhere where they'd said he's quite nice. In a way, we was lucky because when I got there, I didn't know, but when we did get there, the man that run it was the headmaster from my children's school from before, so he knew us, and he used to let us go up every day to see. Actually, I think it was him that got us through at that time.
And at the point when he died, he was 15 years old.
He was 15, yeah.
You've provided the inquiry with a copy of death certificate. Paul, it's 2687005. And if we see in cause of death, this doesn't mention anything about HIV or AIDS.
No.
Was that at your request?
No, it wasn't. I did wonder why it wasn't, but no, it wasn't.
That can go down, thanks. After he died, you discovered he'd been keeping a diary.
Yes.
And you've shared with us some of the front pages of the diary.
Yeah.
We're going to put that up.
Yeah.
If you need it taken down, we will. Okay. So 2687002, please, Paul. So that's one of the diaries kept.
Yeah.
He liked to put pictures on, and you've said he was meticulous in the way in which
Very.
he wrote and drew.
Very.
Your statement talks about some of the things he put in his diary. Do you want to share any of them? Or would you like me to, or we can just leave that?
I'd let you to.
Okay. So you've told us in your witness statement some of the things that put in his diary. He wrote about how he was feeling, his views about the treatment he was receiving, the pain he was in, his aspirations for the future, about how he'd look after your new baby when he was older and better, and how the baby would want for nothing. You've described how the diaries were very neatly and carefully written. He was very tidy. He wrapped everything in tissue. He recorded his thoughts and feelings about his illness. That's where he wrote he'd noticed how he was treated differently because you were very protective of him. He also wrote that he used to lock himself in the toilets at the hospital when he was in pain because he didn't want anyone to know. And he wrote on the cover of one book that he'd carry on writing in his book until the pages ran out.
Yeah.
He wrote about a future event he was hoping to go to in Planet Hollywood and his future ambitions, and he wrote down events such as your wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
And we'll just have one more document, please, on screen, Paul. It's 2687003. We can see meticulous handwriting, as you describe it, my feelings and my life. This book is basically all about me. Inside, you'll see a lot of my likes and dislikes, my wishes and dreams. Also, it says how I feel on certain days and any worries I had. And we see the date on which it started, the 8th of February 1994, finish when all the pages run out.
Yeah.
And he wasn't able to finish it.
No, he wasn't.
Because he died very soon after that.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you a little bit about the boy and the things he loved?
He was a very strong Liverpool supporter.
Yeah.
He loved playing on his games. He was a very chatty boy. He wasn't shy or anything like that. I think him and his sister used to have arguments a bit, but other than that, no, he was beautiful. When coming to the end, before he died, he started getting quite angry, which I can understand. It was mainly aimed at me. I was very confused about that. His aunties used to go up and he was totally different. But with me, he got very angry. But when I asked Dr. Doherty what was the matter, he said that's probably when these things happen, they tend to get angry with the ones they love the most. But he was just lovely.
He loved Christmas, you said.
He loved Christmas. He loved Christmas and he loved going on holidays.
And he loved school.
He
was a very hard worker at school, you described it.
He loved school. We only found this out after he'd died. He was in hospital quite a lot in the last year, and he was due to do his exams, and he was very keen on doing his exams. I'm not just saying it because he was my son, but he was very bright. We found it hard because we wanted to get some work at the hospital so he could keep up, because he was getting ready for his exams. But the school wasn't sending him. In the end, the hospital had to intervene, and they started sending him some stuff. But it was later, after he died, he used to keep all his papers. His dad had given him a Hemophilia tin. It was like a tube, and he used to keep all his papers in there. But apparently, he had gone very small. He actually was quite tiny compared to the other children of his age then. And we found out he was being bullied. Somebody used to meet him at the gate and take his money off him. And if he had a certain pen, apparently a teacher had told him it was really good to help with his handwriting. So he had got this pen, and the boy took it away from him. And as he said, it wasn't just because it was a pen, but it was because the teacher had said to him it would help him. He wanted it, and he just used to want to. He said he wouldn't even have minded if they took him into a room and let him be on his own. He just wanted to do his work. He used to set everything out. But this boy, obviously because he was smaller, he took advantage of him. And what he said was he just wanted to be left alone so he could do his schoolwork. But we didn't find any of this out because he never told us. We didn't find this out until after he died, and we looked through his diary.
You discovered only years after had died, that he'd also been diagnosed with hepatitis C.
I didn't find that out till 2009.
And how did you find that out?
We used to have the McFarlane Trust, but after he died, all that, we didn't get any more correspondence for them. Then in 2009, apparently the Skipton Trust had taken over from the McFarlane Trust at some point. They just sent, it was just a normal letter thing saying that the people that had got hepatitis C and the ones that had died, there was a, I think they called it something payment. So I contacted them and I said that actually I wasn't aware that I had got hepatitis C because I'd never been told that. So I had to phone up the hospital, and the nurse said she was going to go and try and find his records to have a look. And then when I phoned back the next day, that is when she said that he had hepatitis C. But then she said she wasn't surprised because the two brothers, they had the same. But I hadn't, previous to that, I wasn't made aware of that.
So you'd never been told that he was being tested for hepatitis C or given your consent to that?
No.
And you'd never been told the outcome of any tests?
No.
And it was years after he died,
Yeah.
when you got this letter out of the blue from the
Yeah.
Skipton Fund, that you found out?
Yeah.
You kept what had happened to from anyone other than the very close members of your family?
I didn't even tell my younger children when he died. I told them that he had a rare form of cancer because that's what I was told his ulcers were. It wasn't a cancer that we could get. Once again, it was just something that somebody with HIV got. So that is what I told my children. My older children were aware, but not my younger ones.
And one of the reasons you'd not wanted to talk about it more widely was because of the stigma associated with HIV and AIDS, and one of the phrases you've used in your witness statement is of not wanting to feel like a leper.
That's right. When I first heard about HIV, a few weeks later I was reading a paper, and it always sticks in my mind. There was a reporter for the paper, and what he said was, everybody with HIV, they should be put on an island and left there. And I remember sitting there thinking, how can they say something like that? My children have got HIV and they're just little children. How can you say something like that? So actually, I didn't feel like I wanted to tell my younger children that. I didn't want to put them through that.
In fact, subsequently, one of your other children was told at St Thomas's by a doctor treating him that had HIV and AIDS,
Yes.
and had died as a result?
Yes.
And that was without your knowledge and consent?
No, I didn't know until my son come home and he said to me, he didn't know, what was this about? He didn't know.
And your daughter?
My daughter was told first. She had gone for an appointment to my GP, and the GP had told her. So she come and told me the same thing. But up until then, they didn't know.
Has anyone ever offered you or any of your family members testing for HIV or HCV over the years? Did they ever offer
No.
that?
No.
Did they ever offer you any support or counselling?
No.
You've mentioned the McFarlane Trust.
Yes.
You've received some money from the McFarlane Trust while he was alive, which you accepted in particular because you wanted to take him on holiday.
That's right. In the beginning, I think it must have been around about 1988, we received a letter. It was, I think, like a solicitor's letter, and it was saying that they were going to be given this money, but we had to sign a form. We were advised to sign it because they told us we couldn't fight the government, so it'd be best just to take it, which we did. Then the McFarlane Trust was set up, and they used to give, I think it was £230 a month. And that went on until he died. He died on the 18th of February in the early hours of the morning, and I got a letter. The last letter I ever got from the Macfarlane Trust was on the 19th. They sent and they told me that they were sorry to hear about dying, and they put in a cheque for £1,000 to help with his funeral costs. I didn't actually get how they knew, but then when I said to Chris, she said that she has to inform them when this happens, and that was the last time I heard from them after that.
You've said in your statement how none of this has ever gone away from your mind. You've
No.
tried to push it away. You've said the inquiry has brought it back, but you wanted to give your statement and to give your evidence for.
Yes, this is the first time I've ever been able to say to somebody, it was like when he died, everything was, it wasn't mentioned anymore, and it was like he didn't exist in my head. He did exist. He had every right to be here now. That was taken away from him, and I've never been able to talk to anybody. And then when I found out, and that was just purely by coincidence that I found out there was going to be an inquiry, I got quite angry because I thought I should be there as well. And that's when I contacted the people, and we even got a picture put up, even though we was late.
And one of the things you've said in your statement is that a thing that's important to you is that nobody has ever said that they are sorry.
No, nobody's ever told me how this happened, why it happened, or just to say to me, oh, we're sorry. I've never heard nothing like that.
I haven't got any further questions for you, but is there anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to get the story out there because he did exist. And actually, I think people should know what happened to him because it shouldn't have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you have indeed got the story out there.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for giving your evidence.
Thank you for listening to me.
And thank you for supporting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You can stay there as long as you like, or you may prefer to sit over there. It's entirely up to you.
Thank you.
Well, Miss Richards, Mrs. C was the last witness for today.
That's right, sir.
And tomorrow we start at 10, not at 10:30, so 10 o'clock start tomorrow. Who are we hearing from then?
Tomorrow, sir, there are 3 witnesses, Della Rhinus Hirsch, Stephen Carroll and Robert Worsley.
10 o'clock.